Hello Gators, this is 4-5 congruence of right triangles. I can identify congruent right triangles. I can use congruent triangles to prove angles and sides congruent. This is our set of shortcuts that we have. This allows us to only have to prove three things or three pairs of corresponding parts. Is there another method that could help? Let's take a look at these two right triangles. These two right triangles, we have two pairs of sides and an included angle. So we could easily use side, angle, side. Now, normally when we see this, we would have said no, because this is not an included angle. But this is a right triangle, and we could call these two sides an H, and we could call these two sides an L for leg. And we know that the Pythagorean theorem says that if you know two sides of a right triangle, you can find the third side. Since these sides are both exactly the same, when we put them into the Pythagorean theorem, we are going to get them to be the same answers. And when they're the same answers, that means this will be congruent to this. And so therefore, these two triangles are congruent. Even at first, though we said it wasn't, they are congruent by SSS. And the only reason it works is because it's a right triangle and we were able to use the Pythagorean theorem. So here is the HL theorem. You have to be working with a right triangle with a right angle in it, and you have to have a hypotenuse and a leg. And when that happens, you can use this theorem. Let's see if we have enough information to use the it says what information is needed. Well, we have a right triangle here, but this is not indicated to be a right angle. So what we need is to be able to say that angle L is a right angle. Once we do that, then we are going to satisfy the HL theorem. Over here, we have a pair of sides that are shared here. That is the leg. So what is needed, we know we have a right angle on both sides. What is needed is we need to know that TU, which is the hypotenuse, is going to be congruent to UV. These are the things we need in order to use HL. Let's go ahead and practice with some proofs. So in this proof, we have this side congruent to this side, and we do have a hypotenuse here shared, and this does look like HL. It's not side angle side because the angle is not included, but it is a right triangle, so this looks like a good candidate for HL. So step 1 is given. Step 2 is also given, and that is actually our leg, so I'm going to put an L. And then we're going to say SQ congruent to SQ, which is our hypotenuse, and that's a reflexive situation, reflexive property of congruence. And now we have our triangles congruent by HL, not side angle side, because the angle is not included. Let's take a look at this. These, all the sides of one are congruent to all the sides of the other, so the triangles are congruent, and we know that they're going to be congruent by SSS. Now, knowing that the triangles are congruent, I can now say angle J is congruent to angle G. Now, the triangles are congruent. I know angle J will be congruent to angle G. Angle A will be congruent to angle L. Angle M is congruent to angle C. And that's because these are corresponding parts of the congruent triangles, and we know that they will be congruent. Let's go through a proof. So we have N as a midpoint, which makes this congruent to this. We have AX congruent to NY, and we have NX congruent to BY. So it looks like we have SSS, and we want to prove that these angles are congruent. So this is from the given, and we know that a midpoint means that AN will be congruent to NB. We are also given another pair of sides. So this is an S, this is an S, and we still have one more given we haven't written, and that is an X is congruent to BY, and that is another side. So the triangles are congruent by S, S, S. Now that the triangles are congruent, we have all these other parts of the triangle that we know are congruent, and that's by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Let's do it again. So we have RT congruent to RV, and we have TRS, that's the single, congruent to VRS, that's this one. We know they have a reflexive side, so this looks like a good candidate for side, angle, side. And once we get the triangles congruent, we can get these extra parts congruent. So it looks like I need to write the first given, RT is congruent to RV. Here's my, and that is going to be a side. This is going to be my angle. This is my reflexive side. Property of equality. And now I can state the triangles are congruent. Triangle RTS congruent. And remember that R has to go with angle R at the bottom. So this is R. And we know that T will go with V. And then we have our last letter S. And we know that side, angle, side. The triangles are congruent. So the extra parts that we didn't need are also congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And that's the end of the screencast.